I saw some Sundance movies and I'm still talking about them from worst to Betsy. Here we go. One of the films I saw was On the Count of Three. This is the feature-length directorial debut from actor Gerard Carmichael. Both him and Christopher Abbott star in the film, and they have a really good chemistry together. There's an interesting contrast between the way these characters talk to each other. This movie's kind of like a buddy comedy, except a bit more dark and edgy. The plot of this movie is that these two characters are best friends and they're also depressed, so they have a plan to kill each other. So it's basically like a suicide pact and they just want the other person to pull the trigger, I guess. Quite honestly, the writing in this film feels pretty juvenile. It doesn't really explore or properly handle these serious issues like depression and suicide. It feels like it's only part of the movie just so it can be more edgy. The tones in this film feel kinda all over the place. At points it tries to be funny, and at other points it expects you to take it completely seriously. Personally, I found that the comedic elements worked a lot better than the serious ones. The dynamic between these characters keeps the film being watchable at least up until a point. That point being as soon as you realize just how repetitive the formula of this film is. Let's kill each other this way. Okay. Oh no, something happened to get in the way of us doing that. I guess we're gonna have to find a different way to kill each other. Lather, rinse, repeat. The narrative setups are incredibly obvious and much of the film is predictable. There's a really awful flashback sequence where they give Henry Winkler a shitty looking wig that makes his hair look like Owen Wilson's. It looks terrible and it's completely unironic in how it's presented with zero self-awareness, and because of this it unintentionally spoils events that take place later in the film. Like, obviously they're going to meet up with him now, otherwise why would they hire a really old actor to play someone younger in a flashback sequence? They could have just hired a younger person, so obviously now we're going to be seeing the older version. And when we do see the older version of the character within 5 minutes of that first flashback, it shows another flashback just to make sure that we understand that that's the character. Yep, I know that's him. We just saw a flashback 5 minutes ago, and the only difference between him and the flashback was a shitty looking wig. The scenes that feel stupid and ridiculous just wind up becoming more frequent as the film goes on. The tone of the soundtrack often clashes with what's being shown in the film. There are scenes that otherwise would have been fine but now feel really lame and cheesy. There are still things I do like about the film. Like I said, I really enjoyed the performances of the two main characters. The film is also pretty well shot and it looks nice in general. In some ways, this is a well-directed movie, especially for a first feature. I really like a lot of what this film thinks it's doing, but unfortunately, it is just not very self-aware at all. Anyway, check this one out if you want. A few people seem to really enjoy it, and I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. Another film I saw is Misha and the Wolves. This is a documentary about a woman who created a Holocaust memoir who fell under scrutiny. The story in this documentary is definitely interesting and intriguing. At points, it definitely feels stretched out for what it is, but it is certainly worth finishing to the end. This documentary is also well shot and it looks nice in general, but unfortunately, a lot of the post-production elements of this film were not handled very well. The music in this film works very well when it's in the background and complementary for the slower scenes, but unfortunately, every time the film shows something dramatically important, the soundtrack goes way overboard. The music in this movie needed to calm down quite a lot. Anytime there was some kind of reveal in the story, the music got so loud and so cheesy. The more important the scene, the worse it is. The editing in this film also was not great. At points, there are awful cheesy sound effects during sequences that might as well have come from a fucking Saw film. Anyway, like I said, it is interesting enough to continue watching to the end, but don't say I didn't warn you about the music and the editing. And I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. It's closer to a 6 than a 4. Another movie I saw was a Swedish horror thriller film called Knocking. This is director Frida Kemp's feature-length directorial debut. This is a very well-presented film overall. It's got a good tone and soundtrack. There's a healthy variety of interesting camera angles and a really enjoyable style. There are some really great uncomfortable-looking shots, some that are above her head and some that are uncomfortably close to her. There's a great atmosphere where you can really feel the heat in the apartment. The film has a really good pacing and there's always a sense of progression. This movie is really good for what it is if you can get past a couple things. It doesn't take long to start wondering why she never records anything happening on her phone. So having a movie where the concept is spooky things are happening to this woman and nobody believes her and she has a phone and she just doesn't record anything on on her phone and she never once tries to or attempts to or even thinks about doing it. It's really kind of fucking annoying. This is also a film that easily could have been set in another decade where smartphones aren't a thing. It's just unfortunately a movie that doesn't care at all about whether or not it makes any sense or whether or not you can actually relate to the characters in it and their decisions that they make. And as is typical with those kinds of movies, it really fell apart at the end. There was a shot of a medical worker giving the worst chest compressions ever of all time, and in a narrative sense, the ending is incredibly unfulfilling. The ending of this film is pretty unsatisfying in general. I really wanted to love this movie, and I still think that it is very well presented on a technical level. I'm excited to see what this director tackles next because they are clearly very competent at what they do. Hopefully it's a better story next time. Anyway, check this one out if you want, and I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. It's closer to a 6 than a 4. Thank you.